He was born in Newmarket, Ontario, Canada in 1962 as the youngest child of an accountant and a homemaker. At the age of 8, he discovered his talent for impressions while making faces in the mirror, and at the age of 10, even wrote a letter to the Carol Burnett Show, letting them know he was already a master of impressions and should be considered for a spot on the show. At the age of 15, he had his first stand-up comedy experience at Yuck Yucks Comedy Club in downtown Toronto. And while his first performance was a disaster, he continued to perform and gaining much success in the comedy scene of that area later on. After failing to be casted in the 1980 and 1981 season of Saturday Night Live, he would start working on the overnight locally airing program called The All Night Show that aired on CMFT TV. Then, after moving to Hollywood in 1983, he was cast in the sitcom The Duck Factory, which premiered in April of 1985 and was then canceled in July of the same year. Then, after returning to touring his impressionist act, he was noticed by Samuel Goldwyn Jr. and was asked to audition and landed the starring role on Once Bitten. He would then audition for Saturday Night Live 2 more times before being casted in the ensemble comedy series In Living Color, giving him the popularity to land a few of his first major film roles. In 1994, he would become the first ever actor to have 3 #1 movies in the same year when he starred in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber. As of 2024, he is one of the top 50 highest grossing actors of all time at the North American box office, with a total gross of over $2.5 billion and an average of $94.3 million per film, with 13 films grossing over $250 million worldwide, with the highest grossing film being Bruce Almighty. He has also been nominated for over 145 awards, winning 49 of them. Today, we see if Jim Carrey is a phenom or a flop. Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Connor O'Connor. Go ahead and relax and take your shoes off. If this is your first time here, don't forget you took your shoes off before you leave. Welcome to episode number 4 of Phenom or Flop, the show where we take the critical and audience scores for an actor's filmography, smash them together to see if, according to the Cindy metric, a shout out to Cindy, if that actor is a phenom or flop. If this is your first time watching, Cindy is my mother, and the Cindy metric is how we determine what movies count towards if the actor is a phenom or a flop. For the metric, an actor must be starring in or highly billed on the movie for it to count towards the numbers for the actor. Once we narrow down the movies, we get the average score for both the critics and the audience scores according to Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb, and Wikipedia. I will also like to add that documentaries aren't counted within the Cindy metric. Since the actor isn't typically acting in them or performing, like they would in a stand-up special, Cindy decided that they shouldn't count. In this episode, we're celebrating the release of Sonic the Hedgehog 3 by looking at Jim Carrey, who returns to the franchise as Dr. Ivo Robotnik, does double duty in this movie as Ivo's grandfather, Gerald Robotnik, as they scheme to beat Sonic and take over the world. The Canadian-born actor is very well known and was propelled into stardom through the success of his impressions of other celebrities, but let's see how good of an impression he's made with the critics and audiences. With that, let's start looking at the movies we have today. Out of the 51 movies that were credited to Jim Carrey, including TV movies, 34 of them would fit into the Cindy metric. Shout out to Cindy. The movie list for Jim Carrey is The Sex and Violence Family Hour, All in Good Taste, Copper Mountain, Once Bitten, Earth Girls Are Easy, Doing Time on Maple Drive, Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, Dumb and Dumber, The Mask, Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls, Batman Forever, The Cable Guy, Liar Liar, The Truman Show, Man on the Moon, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Me, Myself, and Irene, The Majestic, Bruce Almighty, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, Fun with Dick and Jane, The Number 23, Dr. Seuss's Horton Hears a Who, Yes Man, Disney's A Christmas Carol, I Love You Philip Morris, Mr. Popper's Penguins, Kick-Ass 2, The Incredible Burt Wonderstone, Dumb and Dumber 2, The Bad Batch, Sonic the Hedgehog, and Sonic the Hedgehog 2. So from that list of movies, let's look at the top 5 best and the 5 worst for both scores. For critics, the top 5 movies are, with a 79%, Horton Hears a Who, a 2008 American animated adventure comedy that was based on the 1954 book of the same name by Dr. Seuss. It was the third Dr. Seuss feature film adaptation and the first adaptation to be fully animated using CGI technology, as well as the first and so far only theatrical film adaptation to receive positive reviews. It was also the second Dr. Seuss film starring Jim Carrey after How the Grinch Stole Christmas from 2000. At 1 point higher with an 80% is The Mask, a 1994 American superhero comedy film directed by Chuck Russell that stars Jim Carrey in the title role along with Cameron Diaz in her film debut. Carrey plays Stanley Ipkiss, an average everyday man who finds a magical wooden mask that, when worn, transforms him into the green-faced troublemaker who can cartoonishly alter himself and his surroundings at will. Sorry, this is the part of the episode where I hold space for the green character. Shout out to Cynthia Erivo. At 83%, we have Liar Liar, a 1997 American fantasy comedy film that was directed by Tom Shadyac and written by Paul Guillet and Stephen Mazur. It stars Jim Carrey as a lawyer who has built his entire career on lying, but when he finds himself cursed to speak only the truth for a day, he then struggles to maintain his career and reconcile with his ex-wife and son, whom he alienated through his constant lying. With 92% is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, a 2004 American science fiction romantic film that follows two individuals who undergo a procedure to erase their memories and forget each other after the disillusion of their romantic relationship. The title comes from the 1717 poem Elogia to Elibar by Alexander Pope, which uses elements of the psychological drama, science fiction, and nonlinear narrative to explore the nature of memory and love. And the highest rated with a 94% is The Truman Show, a 1998 American psychological comedy drama that depicts the story of Truman Burbank, a man that is unaware that he is living his entire life being filmed on a colossal soundstage and broadcast as an internationally popular reality TV show. All of his friends, family, and members of his community are paid actors who are there to maintain the illusion and keep Truman unaware of the falsehoods of his world. Now on for the top 5 audience scores, where we start with an 84% at Dumb and Dumber. This is a 1994 American buddy comedy movie directed by Peter Farrelly, starring Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels. It tells the story of Lloyd Christmas and Harry Dunn, who are two dumb, well-meaning friends from Rhode Island, who set out on a cross-country road trip hoping to return a briefcase full of money to its perceived owner, mistaking it as abandoned, though it was actually left as a ransom. Then we move ahead to 89 with The Truman Show. Then, right past it with a 93% is Sonic the Hedgehog. This is a 2020 action comedy adventure film based on the video game series. Ben Schwartz voices Sonic, a blue anthropomorphic hedgehog who runs at supersonic speeds and teams up with the town sheriff to stop the mad scientist Dr. Robotnik, who we talked about is played by Carrey. At number 2 with a 94% is Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind, but the highest rated movie for audiences with a score of 96% is Sonic the Hedgehog 2. This is the 2022 sequel to Sonic the Hedgehog that sees Sonic team up with Tails to find the Master Emerald before their nemesis Dr. Robotnik, aka Eggman, and his partner Knuckles the Echidna. Now it's time to look at his lowest rated movies. For critics, his 5 worst movies were, with a 30%, Dumb and Dumber 2, spelled T-O. The 2014 buddy comedy sequel to the 1994 movie, it tells the story of Lloyd Christmas and Harry Dunn, again played by Carrey and Daniels, respectively, who return as the two dim-witted friends to set out on a cross-country road trip, this time to locate Harry's daughter, who has been adopted. At 30% is Fun with Dick and Jane. This is a 2005 American crime comedy with a screenplay by Judd Apatow and Nick Stoller. A remake of the 1997 film of the same name, it stars Jim Carrey and Tia Leone as a middle-class married couple who struggles to maintain jobs after the husband's employer goes bankrupt and eventually resorts to robberies. With a 21% is Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls. It is a 1995 American detective comedy and the sequel to Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. The film was written and directed by Steve Odenkirk, a close friend of Carrey, who has also collaborated in the production as the character consultant for the first film. Jim Carrey reprises his role as Ace Ventura, a detective who specializes in the retrieval of tame and captive animals whose investigation is brought to Africa to locate a missing bat. At 11% is Once Bitten. This is a 1985 American teen horror comedy and is Carrey's first major leading role. He plays Mark Kendall, who is a naive high school student who is seduced in a nightclub by a sultry blonde who, unknown to him, is a centuries-old vampire. And the lowest rated for critics at 7% is The Number 23. This is a 2007 American psychological thriller written by Friendly Phillips and directed by Joel Schumacher. And it was Joel Schumacher's 23rd film that he's ever worked on. Carrey stars as a man who becomes obsessed with the 23 enigma once he reads about it in a strange book that seemingly mirrors his own life. Now on to the top 5 worst for audiences. We start off again with Dumb and Dumber 2 at 35%. Then moving down to 33% is The Incredible Burt Wonderstone. This is a 2013 American comedy directed by Don Scardino and written by John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein. The movie follows Steve Carell as Las Vegas magician Burt Wonderstone as he attempts to reunite with his former partner Anton Marveltons, played by Steve Buscemi, to take on dangerous street magician Steve Gray, played by Jim Carrey. Again at 33% is Batman Forever. This movie was directed by Joel Schumacher and produced by Tim Burton and Peter McGregor Scott. It stars Val Kilmer as Bruce Wayne/Batman as he attempts to prevent Two-Face, played by Tommy Lee Jones, and the Riddler, played by Carrey, from uncovering his secret identity and extracting information from the minds of Gotham City's residents. Coming in at 30% is The Bad Batch. This is a 2016 American dystopian thriller directed and written by Anna Lily Annapur. It follows a young woman, Suki Waterhouse, exiled to the desert and then attacked by a group of cannibals led by Miami Man, who's played by Jason Momoa, who barely escapes before finding a bizarre settlement run by a charismatic leader, Keanu Reeves. And with the lowest rated audience score coming in at 11% is Copper Mountain, a 1983 Canadian comedy television film written and directed by Damian Lee and David Mitchell. It was produced for CTV Television Network and premiered on the First Choice TV network. Starring Jim Carrey and Alan Thicke, it was a thinly veiled commercial for the now-defunct Club Med ski resort in Copper Mountain, Colorado. The majority of the runtime consists of a rom-com plot interspaced with performances by country and rock and roll musicians. The last top 5 we're going to go over before we crunch the numbers is my top 5 by Jim Carrey. As a way to show my appreciation for the actors and their work, I share my top 5 movies that they've done, and it does not affect the Cindy metric score. A shout out to Cindy. So, my top 5 Jim Carrey movies are: number 5, Sonic the Hedgehog. I played this game as a kid, and seeing the movie have a lighthearted and childlike energy played great on my nostalgia of the game. Jim Carrey brings his classic energy to this movie and gives a cartoonish performance in a live-action medium. Number 4 is Batman Forever. This movie also plays on my nostalgia today, as I own this movie and its sequel on VHS as a kid. And besides from the Batman the Animated Series and Justice League cartoons, these were my main example of who Batman were and the characters around him until I started reading the comics for myself. Jim Carrey's quirky energy made me believe it was normal for a villain to leave clues for who he was at the crime scene after he had escaped. Number 3 is Bruce Almighty. Being raised religious, this movie was either loved by those around me or was a great source of blasphemy. But for me, it was a great life lessons and made Jim Carrey into a relatable main character that was flawed but still was able to become a good man in the end. At number 2 is The Mask. This movie was the first example I saw of Carrey's ability to act cartoonish while being a real living person. It was high energy and silly while at the same time throwing in incredibly written and timed jokes. It was also my first time seeing what Cameron Diaz looked like, so... And then at number 1 is How the Grinch Stole Christmas. This is one Christmas movie that I quote more than any other. It's a wonderful expansion of what the original book was, which I am once again nostalgic for, as it was one of the books my mom read to me on Christmas Eve before going to bed. Now, this is time for a new segment for this show that I'm going to call my Beige Flag Movie Recommendation. This segment is where I recommend a movie from the actor of focus's filmography that is neither their best work or their worst. It's a movie that is good, but you wouldn't say that it's your favorite movie of all time. And it's not bad because you still enjoy watching it. It's truly a beige flag movie. This week's movie is Earth Girls Are Easy. It's a musical comedy following Valerie, played by Gina Davis, who is dealing with discovering her fiancé Ted, who's played by Charles Rocket, has cheated on her when a trio of aliens played by Jeff Goldblum, Jim Carrey, and Damon Wayans crash their spaceship into her swimming pool. Once she shaves these furry beings at the salon where she applies nails, she discovers 3 handsome men underneath. After absorbing the native culture via television, these spacemen are ready to hit the dating scene in 1980s Los Angeles. This movie has some great visual gags in it, as well as some great character work from not just Jim Carrey and Damon Wayans, who are more side characters, but also from Gina Davis and Jeff Goldblum, whose chemistry was so palpable on screen that I wasn't shocked to find out that they were actually married for a short bit of time in real life. And it's just a fun movie that surprised me at every turn, including the fact of it being a musical. The style and the way that it's shot and all the characters feel really is sort of a time capsule for what I believe the 80s was. And I think it's really worth watching, especially if you're in a beige kind of mood. Now, compared to the other actors we've done on this show, one difference we see with Jim Carrey's scores here is that all of his top 5 scores are certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. According to the website, for a movie to be considered certified fresh, they need to fit a variety of criteria. For our purposes, according to the Cinemetric, if, quote, the tomato meter scores of 75% or higher with at least 5 reviews from top critics. Carrey's lowest high score was a 79% for Horton Hears a Who, and the lowest high score for the audience being even higher with an 84%. Another factor that will change the outcome of this video eventually is the release of Sonic the Hedgehog 3, which at the time of recording has not been released yet. The release of this movie will add another set of numbers to our scores and will possibly cause them to change, though possibly not in a significant way in either direction, being just one number. But this movie even being released with Jim Carrey as part of the cast is seemingly a miracle according to a previous interview with Carrey. He was once quoted saying to Variety, "Well, I'm retiring, yeah, probably. I'm being fairly serious. It depends. If the Angels bring some sort of script that was written in gold ink that says to me it's going to be a really important for people to see, I might continue down the road, but I'm taking a break." This interview was from 2021, a year before the second Sonic movie was even released. But with the release of Sonic 3 happening before or after you're watching this video. I'm hoping to have it out on the day it releases, but I'm not sure, so I'm just hedgehogging my bets here. It may be his last movie. See, Jim Carrey has stayed true to what he said in that quote, with the only other film project he's been a part of that's been released since then was Dirty Dad, the Bob Saget tribute, which was an ensemble of Saget's friends and family, including Carrey, paying tribute to him after his passing. Recently, though, in an interview, Jim Carrey was asked about this 2021 quote and if it still stands, and about his return even after he made that comment, saying, quote, he needed money. If this is truly the case, then with an opening weekend estimated range between $65 million and $85 million and a budget of $120 million, I hope the script really was written in gold ink so that he doesn't regret his return. With all of that being said, though, that brings us back to the main question of this video. Is Jim Carrey a phenom or a flop? When it comes to the critics' scores, we once again have 2 different scores, since a few of his early movies didn't have a score on Rotten Tomatoes, giving us 2 different percentages. After adding up all the score of all of his movies, this gives us a total of 1,592. When dividing that by the 30 films that actually give him a score, this gives us an average of 53%. When using all the movies for the average, though, bringing the total to 34, the scores come down to 47%. Averaging out the 2 gives us the critic score of 50%. Doing the same for the audience scores, the total is 1,916. That gets divided by 32 first for the 60%, and then by 34 for 56%, giving us the audience average of 58%. As usual, we look for the score of 60% to mirror how Rotten Tomatoes calculates their score, and this unfortunately means for both the critics and the audiences, Jim Carrey is a flop. However, when going through the movies, when running them through the Cindy metric, shout out to Cindy, I found myself familiar with, if not having already seen, almost half of the movies and remembering I enjoyed and even loved watching those movies within the filmography. And that's giving most of the credit to the performances Jim Carrey gave in those movies. He is a fantastic performer who brings an unparalleled energy to his roles and is able to not only excel in comedy, but excel in dramatic roles with dignity and pathos those characters need to be fully realized. No matter if he's channeling the authenticity of Andy Kaufman in Man on the Moon, or if he's begging you not to use the toilet after him in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, Jim Carrey creates a performance meant to last. With that being said, go ahead and tell me your favorite Jim Carrey movie in the comments below, and also leave a suggestion for which actor you think I should take a look at next. And don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to see if your actor is next on my list. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.